Hey guys, we made it. So far, no tornadoes in our area. Yay. Still have a little bit of wind, but I think that our warning is over and we still have power, so we're hoping that that stays the same. So we should be good. I got the curtains open so I can look outside just in case. You never know. It's been a while. But hey, we're here, and as far as I know, we'll be staying here. So if we suddenly vanish and disappear, you'll know what happened. You never know when those things can happen. So welcome to our live stream. People are coming in. Hi, Ophelia. Yes, almost, Samhain. It's coming up close. Hi, Tanya. How you doing?
So far, no tornadoes over here.
Thank goodness. They don't get them very often on the coast, but it's the first time I've ever seen a warning. Hi, new subscriber here. Finally caught alive. Okay. Knucking.
I think it's related to Mixley.
Oh, you think so? Does this have to do with the dimension, the fifth dimension creatures or whatever they're called?
That's right.
Danya says, I'm loving the stormy, rainy weather. Yes, the imps. We'll just call you Nuck, I guess. I'm not sure if I can say that all the time, but welcome. Eva says, hello, glad I could make it to a live. Thank you, I'm glad that you're here. And yeah, we're kind of enjoying the stormy weather as well. It's needed rain. We've needed rain for a while, so this is good. Ryder says, hello, how is everyone? We're doing pretty well. I got a shot in my arm for my biceps tendon, and it seems to be helping. It's still not happy, but it's helping some, so that's good. It's from a Kresley Cole book. Say Nix. Okay, we'll call you Nix. What are your Samhain plans? Not anything in particular. I'll see what happens since we're not doing a ritual with a group of people or anything like that. I'll probably read off the list of those who were murdered during the burning times and something of that nature, but don't have any specific plans this year. Ryder says thumbs up. Yes, good on the shoulder.
We got too much other stuff going on to really plan anything right through this.
Well, right, the
doctor's visits,
beginning of the doctor's visits is right after that for the surgery, so we're sort of otherly focused. But I am definitely, interestingly enough, at my office this week, one of my clients had a visitation by her husband who passed a couple of years ago. She was very startled by it, but it was very real. She felt someone touch her, and it woke her up, and then she felt frightened, and she felt them leave, and then she felt bad that she'd been afraid. So we talked about that and how this time of year is when more of those types of encounters take place. So Ophelia says, we did that one already. Jonathan says, hi everyone, Siofra Ian, please tell us how you guys are doing. Share with us. Yeah, we're doing okay. I've been referred to a hand surgeon to see exactly what's going on with my hand, and my shoulder injection seems to be helping, so we'll see how that goes. Ian has been doing better this week, and we're just keeping our fingers crossed that it'll continue that way until we get through the surgery, so then we can find out if there's other stuff going on and get that fixed. So we're doing pretty well. Not as high stress as the week before, thank goodness. Yes. No ER visits.
Time for a lower stress week.
Yes, we really need a lower stress week. Yep. Ryder says, I love encounters. Yep. Not everyone does. My sister called today, and she was talking about, I guess, I was telling her about the haunted objects video I did, and I guess a neighbor of hers that she'd known for years liked to sit in this rocking chair all the time, and he passed, and then somebody rented the house out to a family, and they freaked out and called the guy who rented it and said, this house is haunted. What do I do? And they called my sister to ask what they should do. And she said, mow the lawn, because he was very particular about his lawn. It was his thing. It was like, you need to take care of the lawn. He's probably really upset that you're not taking care of the lawn. And the very next day when they drove by, the lawn had been mowed. So apparently they took it seriously. So that was kind of interesting to hear. Ophelia says, I loved your haunted objects video. Thank you very much. It was longer than I expected it to be, because I'm like, oh yeah, there's not that much to talk about. And then I'm going like, well, wait a minute. And then there's this other thing. And I probably left a whole bunch out that I don't even remember. Jonathan says, yes, Ophelia, great video. Thank you. It was fun to do. I wanted to do that. Came up with the idea, and I thought this is the perfect time of year to do it, to just add a little more fun to the season. You know, be topical. You never know. Ruth says, hi. Hi, Ruth. Ophelia says, it's okay. Could have listened all day. Well, I'm glad you guys like to hear me talk, since I apparently like to talk. So, being a storyteller. That's kind of the way I like it. Jonathan says, ethics question. It's unwise to have emotional connections with elementals and elementaries. Do you see a problem with binding them to objects? Well, often you use an object to build a house, as it were, for them. And so if they don't have something physical to be part of, it's much more difficult to work with them. So, no,
Yeah,
I don't see a problem with that.
Right. It's not necessarily unwise to have emotional connections with them, but you have to be able to be, well, depending, if we're talking created elementals or not, that question gets answered differently. If it's an elemental or something that you have not created yourself for those purposes, then yes, I would see a problem binding them to an object. But what you normally do in that case, or in the case of a nature spirit, is you make them a house and offer them the house and hope they'll come live in it and then help you out. So the house could be in some tribes it could be a gourd.
Or a rock,
Or a rock, yep. Some of the Santeria ones in Bhutan and that use a stone, and they put them in it. If you've created it yourself, then everything related to that is 100% your karma. So if you want it to really act, then I would definitely bind it to an object.
So Jonathan says, created haunted objects, not trapping stray beings. Yes, ethically, I think that's a bad idea, and I've seen people selling like haunted dolls, where they say that they have trapped a spirit in the doll, and I consider that incredibly unethical for myself. I wouldn't do it.
Yeah,
I wouldn't want to own one. I wouldn't want to pay someone for doing that to someone. And actually, I haven't told you this yet, though, but I just read a story that made the news. There's a murder of a woman where the husband was getting spellcasters to try and force her to come back to him, to love him, to be injured, so he had to take care of her, so he would be appreciated and all this other stuff. And they mention that in the murder investigation as part of the story, although it would appear the spellcasters aren't in legal trouble, but it brought up the subject of that. When random people write and say, hey, can you make so-and-so fall in love with me? It's like, one, I would never do it, but two, how do I know why you would want that to happen? If you're trying to ask that question, there's probably something wrong with the relationship, and magic is not the solution. But I just thought that was bizarre, that apparently there was a whole slew of spellcasters that he was paying money and getting kits and having them cast for him in order to force his wife, and it didn't work, so he had her murdered instead. I'm like, yeah, what a catch. But yeah, so Ruth says, good to see you. It's good to see you're okay. Yes, we are okay. Jonathan says, but is there karma with created elementals or elementaries? And you already said yes.
Absolutely. Anything that an elemental might do will either credit or debit your karma, so to speak. We'll not go into what karma is at the moment, but yes. And basically, you're entirely responsible for them. As Barden mentions in his book, if one goes astray and starts vampirizing something or something like that, you can't have them get out of control, because if they do that, then whatever harm would happen to the other person's health will go right on your karma, as if you had done it to them directly.
I think that's a good answer. I would agree. Anything you make, there's a certain possibilities of that. People can take it a little bit too far, like the group north of us who decided that if we learned anything from them, then they were responsible for all of our actions. I think that takes the whole point of free will and self-autonomy and stuff to an extreme level, and it's also kind of hubris and, like they're all knowing and they know everything that you're doing and they can be judge, jury, and executioner kind of thing, a little bit beyond the scope. But other than that, Saval says, greetings, hi. Mia says, can some entity move into a person, and if so, how to avoid it? I mean, one own person's body. Well, yeah. I mean, I talked about that in the haunted objects with that one spirit that tried to enter my body. I mean, spirits can enter into people, especially if you happen to be a medium like me, but it needs to be a voluntary process. You don't have to allow it to take place. I have seen earthbound spirits attached to people under certain circumstances, like in a bar when people are getting drunk and they're out of control and stuff like that. A lot of times they can actually get earthbound spirits attracted to them and follow them out. I've seen that happen, which is slightly different. It's sort of an influence rather than a possession being inside of it. But natural authority and personal boundaries is the key to protect yourself against anything like that. You have to volunteer and allow it to take place. When I was channeling, I had my particular guardian that did almost all of the sessions, and then if someone else was going to come in, I was made aware of it and asked permission. So if you're dealing with any kind of an entity that isn't willing to follow the rules that you've set, then they're negative and you shouldn't have anything to do with them at all. Jonathan says, karma in terms of feeling sorry for them, what they do is of course on the creator.
Well, Barden says you can, and you can get too attached to them and not want to destroy them, but you need to take a absolute approach. And no, you shouldn't get too attached to something of your own creation other than it being narcissistic. Barden says you're better off to, if you're approaching that point, to kill that elemental, that elemental that the person has created themselves, and make a new one rather than get attached to one for a long time. But I think there's no problem really about feeling sorry for them. You just have to watch how that relates to your own actions.
All right. Jonathan says, Sav, Ollie, my guy, I'm very glad you are here. Yes, welcome back. So, waiting for questions at this point. They're probably all flooding it at the same time, and the whole screen will go like boom, 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 boom. This is what usually happens.
Well, questions are good.
Yes, we like questions.
Otherwise, you can't help people if nobody asks any questions.
Yeah, and you can't learn anything about someone else's experiences if you don't ask the question either. Mia says, how to understand that you are a medium. Okay, a medium, I did a video on being a medium to try and explain it, but what it means, and here come a whole pile of them all at once, yes. Let me make that stop so it doesn't scroll past where I can see. A medium is a person who has an ability to communicate with the non-physical world around us. So it's not just the ability to see and interact with, but also the ability to feel and sometimes transmit information from the other side. Most mediums that people know about are trance mediums, and a trance medium sort of puts their body into a state of suspension where their conscious mind is no longer in control of what's going on, and they're basically not home. They kind of like leave the premises open and then invite a spirit being, usually their spirit guide of some kind, to come in and to communicate with the people that are there at the seance or the reading or whatever they want to call it, and they don't remember anything that happens. I'm not a trance medium. I don't like the idea of giving up a large portion of my life to put me on hold so that some other voice can come and do its thing. So I'm a conscious medium channel, and that means that I can change the landscape inside of my body. Like when I experience that part of it, it's like my brain waves start to change. The whole left side of my head sort of feels like it's tingling and opening, and the entity comes in through the left side, and I move my consciousness over to the right, and so she uses one half, and I'm still there, kind of on top of what's going on. And I could, if I needed to, stop a session. Of course, that was with an entity that I trusted. She's like a relative, as it were, spiritually speaking. But that meant that when I was doing that a lot, I was hearing the words that she was saying and experiencing the energy that she brought directly. And so I also learned, got benefit from the experience. So that would be what a medium is. It's more of a direct type of communication with spirits. Hopefully that helps. Ophelia says, my father passed away this year, and I'm planning on connecting with him on Samhain. How do you think I approach this? Well, there's a bunch of different potential methods that you can use. You can invite him to like a dumb supper where you put out pictures of him, put things that remind you of him, write him letters, read out loud. There's have an object that belonged to him, that was special to him, that you might have, and meditate on him, invite him, to come in, and try to be specific about who you're inviting, and he is the one you want, kind of thing. It's going to be different for everybody as far as that goes. Jonathan says, excited about my Beltane, going to use my Beltane fire to forge a spearhead to use as an Athame. Wow! Must be a pretty hot fire.
Pretty awesome.
Pretty awesome. Jonathan said, also going to look for spirit beings through my holy stone like a crazy person. Good! See what you find. Let us know. Desideradum says, howdy. Hi, Desideradum. Ryder says, I am listening but not interacting. I am unpacking and repacking boxes while listening to you. Well, good. So Nick says, can a person experience a spiritual death but still be physically alive, or like be cut off spiritually, and is there a way to remedy that? That's a very complicated question. I think the short answer is yes, somebody can, but it might depend upon the circumstances as to exactly what you mean by this. If you mean if a person can become like disconnected from their own spirit and from life itself, there's certain circumstances, events in a life that can do that can harm that relationship, but you can heal that relationship and reach back out and into the world to become a part of it again. But I think it's unlikely that like the human spirit would die and then the body would be left without anything in it, and then something else could just walk in. We had that, there are those stories about walk-ins where somebody, it was time for them to go, and So they voluntarily left, and then someone else came in and inhabited the body, but I think that's highly unlikely. Probably not a very common thing, and if that happened, someone would know about it, I would assume. But the remedy for not being able to feel connected is to go out into nature and to reestablish those connections and those relationships, sort of regrow them in a way, I guess. Not the right word, but reestablish those connections. Because everything alive and in existence, whether alive like a tree or not alive like a rock, has a form of conscious energy in it that you can connect to. And so, if an issue with your spirit needing healing and so forth, then connecting with other forms of consciousness can help a great deal to get that back. I guess that would be.
I think that's a good answer.
Yeah. Violet says, hello. Hi, Violet. Nice to see you here. Desideram says that, Jonathan, why not create a home vessel for elementals or any other kind of spirit to visit? Please don't create a prison for any sentient being. I'm confident that Jonathan was not talking about doing that. So you're okay. It's okay. We already discussed not doing that. So Nick says, like, sink your roots in. Absolutely. Definitely sink in your roots. And connect to the greater consciousness of the planet and the life force that runs around through everything. So Maya says, so in order for someone to move into you, you have to allow that entity to do it. Do you have to say it out loud? No, you don't have to say it out loud.
But you have to have that feeling that you're inviting it.
Right. She says, I just have this little fear because when I meditate, sometimes thoughts like, can I move into you, pop up in my head. And that's scary. Yeah, you just say no. I mean, if you're not feeling like you're ready to do something like that, just because they're asking you to invite them doesn't mean you have to invite them. Because self-autonomy is very important, and your will is stronger. A living will is stronger than any will out there
And
when
there
it comes
are
to
beings
spirit.
that will take advantage of it, like they hassled my wonderful wife when we stayed at that bed and breakfast. You got hassled by beings that wanted to talk through you.
And they would
and
wanted
just
to
block them out.
Yeah, they wanted to talk to me. They wanted me to help them.
Right.
Yeah, they woke
And
me
you
up
can't
out of
just let
sound
them all-
sleep.
Yeah, you can't just let them all gang up on you.
Well, yeah,
do that.
you have the right to decide what's okay and what's not okay. That's why we talk about boundaries all the time. When it comes to dealing with spirits, boundaries are like the most important power and ability you have to decide whether something is okay. Just because a voice suggests it doesn't mean you need to follow through. And if you're not feeling ready, don't do it. Absolutely do not do it. And I think it's better to err on the side of caution when it comes to that kind of thing anyway.
Me too. It's like, why does somebody,
Yeah.
basically I have nothing to add to that.
Keisha says, would you find connecting with oak wood to be beneficial for protection? Well, oak in itself is a protective type of wood, sort of Martian male energy, I think, is what oak has. So, yeah. Whatever works for you. I mean, it's...
Yeah, if you want to go with Oakwood, you could always go with those, Apollo or... Was it Apollo? What's the association with oak? Is that... Oh, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I'm not so much on the Roman gods, anyway.
Right. And Apollo is the laurel tree, not the oak.
Somebody's the oak. But...
There's a bunch of them that are the oak. Or associated with the oak. Desideram says, like leaving your car engine running without a driver, I'm willing to bet any body alive without a spirit would attract another driver. If that was the case, I don't think it could happen. That's my personal opinion, though.
Yeah, if you leave your body, you're connected astrally and mentally by a cord, and the only way to really leave your body in that sense would be to break that cord between the physical and astral bodies, at which point your body dies anyway. So you really can't, yeah. Good question, though.
So Jonathan said it does a Deratum. I currently have no interest in trapping an intelligence in an object. The question asks about how I should consider the emotions of intelligences I may create.
And okay, that's a new way of rephrasing that question. And I would say that you're talking too much like the intelligence is an actual, or sorry.
He's losing his words.
No, yeah. But they're not nearly as much of an actual individual as like a pet would be, like a cat or a dog or something. They're more of a bundle of forces that you have wrapped together for a purpose, and unless you particularly give them an astral body in all four aspects of the astral body according to the quadrupolar magnet, as Barden calls it, and then you put those emotions into them, and then you have to connect that up to the mental plane and the mental body. I mean, it's a whole big deal. Generally, creating an elemental or something just is that one thing, and it has one defined purpose, and that's all it can do. They don't have any real intellect, not even like that of a kitty cat.
Yeah, you can sort of think about this like a chemical reaction where you put a few chemicals together in a beaker, and you know from experience what kind of reaction they're going to have, and that's its purpose, is to combine and create a specific kind of response.
It does the one thing, and unless you particularly wanted to give it those kind of emotions like feeling hurt and those type of things, then it doesn't have them.
Yeah. I think that would mean you'd have to become a god.
Well, no, you could actually do that if you wanted to spend that much time and effort and
pretty much on the road to becoming a god.
But
a lot of work.
Yeah, it's not the same as really making a life form that has any kind of intelligence.
So Mia said, "Thank you. I always think like an answer to them. No, you can't," which is the right answer. Dazzy says, "I'm here too. Hi, everyone." Hi, Dazzy. And actually, according to this, we've got 27 people who are currently viewing our live stream. They're just not necessarily talking, which is fine. Cool. Jonathan says, "Siofra, I know you know. Please don't say yet. A question for the community. Which moves faster across the sky, sun or moon?" All right, well, let's see what people have to say. Ophelia says, "Hello, there's 25 of us." Yes, see, I was correct. Now there's 27. Desideradum says at Jonathan, "Oh, a servitor? They're about as sentient as an earthworm." Sort of along the same lines of what we were kind of saying. Desideradum says, "Please call me Dizzy. It's easier to write and very appropriate." Okay.
Cool.
If I remember, I may not. You never know, because I'm pretty dizzy myself. Kate says, "When I conscious channel, I always start with I am that I am in beauty and light, setting the stage and rules. I channel my own high self first and see how it goes from there. I'm in charge." Yes.
Thumbs up for that.
Absolutely. Perfect. Daphne says moon. Maya says, "Is it so important to choose a witch name for yourself?" Not unless you think it's important. I mean, some people, the original reason for people to have specific names that they only used during a ritual was for protection during the burning times. If you gave someone your real name in a circle and then they were tortured by the Inquisition, they would know who you were. So if they only know you by your craft name, your witch name, or whatever, if they break under interrogation, they don't get as much information. So there was a real practical reason for that. It has evolved into creating new identities, like in yourself, like birth names that don't fit, changing your name to something that you can define yourself, that works better for you, and so forth, as in, crafting your own identity and that kind of thing. But it isn't if you are happy with who you are, if you're not trying to hide, like from family, and don't want them to find out that you're a pagan or a witch or whatever. That's another reason people use craft names nowadays, is for protection against their loved ones or the people they're related to. Yeah, it's kind of a weird thing. So, no, I don't think it is, but it's entirely up to you, and everyone's going to have their own opinion. Jessica says, hi, Siofra, hi, Ian, hope you have had a nice week. So far, we have. Jonathan says, dizzy, Barden Warren's elementaries can be quite intelligent. Question is the same, can I abuse them free of karma, even an earthworm? Pass. Okay, apparently we're passing. The Misty System says, hello, I'm guessing the sun. Desideratum says, there have been instances documented by mediums of people crossing over while the body's still alive, died shortly after, but odd cases. I guess the silver cord was broken. May have been Alzheimer's cases. Well, I mean, if the silver cord breaks, it's sort of like the body might be like on life support for a period of time before it finally passes.
Martin says it usually looks like a heart attack type of death when a person dies from that reason.
And there are some people who voluntarily do it. So, Jonathan says, Daphne, thank you for participating. You are my favorite person tonight. So, yeah. Good questions. Now I'm waiting again. Here we go. Emerald Dawn says, Hecate is associated with oak and Janus or Zeus. I'm sure there's a lot of gods and goddesses that are associated with different...
It was undoubtedly Zeus that I was thinking of.
Could be.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's just so many myths and stuff out there. Every culture's got different associations with different plants and stones and seasons and colors, and it's one of the things that's fun about them, finding out what they are and how they fit you, and if they fit you, and whether you have an affinity for them or not. Maya says, I don't know what to ask. That's okay. I don't know what to say when I don't have questions. It's a terrible conundrum. We got a little bit of a wind out there, and I thought I saw the lights flicker just briefly, but we didn't lose power, obviously, because we're still here. Nick says, so what's the answer to the riddle? The moon? The sun is stationary, right? So, we're waiting to hear. Philippa says, hello. My dad swears my granddad left his body a day or so before he had a fatal heart attack. My grandmother died before him, and he was simply biding his time to join her.
Well, it doesn't mean that a person can still be alive and wander off from their body. I mean, the body could still be alive till that cord is broken, but there's no reason a person couldn't be wandering off, especially in cases of real sickness or delirium or something. Their astral and mental body might be wandering all around with just leaving their physical body lying there.
I wish I could remember exactly where I learned this piece of information, where I read it, but early on, a book that I had talked about the fact that about 3 days before you die, people suddenly feel extremely peaceful because that part of their spirit that was the conscience leaves, because it knows that the body is going to die, and that's why they suddenly feel unburdened and more relaxed and peaceful going up to death, and they don't have like all these questions about what's my purpose, why am I here, and was this a good idea or whatever. And it can be something like that too, where it's a part that we use in the body while we're alive that's not going to be needed when we pass. So who knows? It's a possibility. So Daphne says, I do not know how to ask, but has anyone experienced a type of telepathy from strangers? I hear things, but do not know whether it's my imagination. The messages speak directly to wounds. I get random stuff like that all the time. Often just like things left over, thought forms left over in a place. I was in the mall one day and walked by their ATM machine and had this instant picture of a guy yelling and screaming at the ATM because he didn't have money in his bank account and he was really mad. And other times we just get random thoughts that sort of wander through and have to decide, like, is this something we need to pay attention to or not? Is this ours or someone else's? And that's why getting to know yourself is so important, so you can tell the difference. And the more control you have over, I mean, telepathy is one of those things that's strong in my family, and I get messages sometimes from relatives that are pretty far away because of that, but you have to gain control over the abilities. I used to have to move from place to place because I could not block other people's thoughts. And so after I lived in the same house for a period of time, I would start to hear the thoughts of all of my neighbors in their houses and what they were saying and what they weren't saying and all that stuff. And it was overwhelming to the point where I couldn't take it anymore. And then I'd have to move to a new neighborhood. And it would take a while before I tuned into all those people. So when you're in that stage, when you don't have that kind of control over what comes in, then, you know, that's one tactic that worked for me. But, you know, living away from people, living up in the Kispioks for 5 years without very many people around was one of the things that helped me to become more acquainted with my own thoughts, because then I could tell these are mine because I'm the only person here, kind of thing. And that started that process of understanding and developing that identity of, like, what's mine, what's someone else's. And there I could still hear people who were many miles away, and I would know what was going on in the valley and stuff like that, but then I could identify that that's what it was. So it wasn't like just some random thought in a mall.
But I get random thoughts all the time from the neighborhood, things like that. People are excited about watching a local movie or something, you know, just anything that I happen to go through my headspace, I guess.
Yeah, and when you say that the messages speak directly to wounds, that would mean that that would be the thing that's easiest for you to pick up on, because you have a personal relationship with that kind of thought. And that's where things can get confusing, because if it relates directly to something that happened to us, then it can become more difficult to realize that it isn't us and stuff. So Jonathan says, everywhere says lapis is water. I get a strong air vibe. Thoughts? And please feel free to answer the sun-moon question. I'm not answering it. I'm letting you all do that.
As far as the lapis, though. I don't know, but it doesn't feel like water to me either, personally.
I always associate lapis with the night sky, so that would be very air. I mean, it looks to me like, you know, the universe with the field of stars in it and, you know, streams of gold specks and things like that. So I think when it comes to stones and interpretations, that there's a lot of people who've decided one thing and they may not be correct. So, you know, go with your gut. Desidram says, Servitors are as sentient as an earthworm, but elementals are powerful and vast, beyond us on many levels. They are pure consciousness of whatever element. I went and lost, there we are. They're made of, from what I understand. Ophelia says, yes, Daphne, I have. I actually think my telepathy is getting stronger. Philippa says, I know we've probably covered this already, but I've only just arrived. How is Ian? He's doing better this week, and he's got less than 3 weeks now before his surgery. So positive energy in his direction is most welcome. Jonathan says, Philippa, this isn't the forum to flesh this out, but if you haven't yet, then consider studying the Gospel of Thomas. It's Tao for us. Ryder says, it's horrible. I'm having my first experience with this. I know it's time to move. would not be so bad if their thoughts were lovely and interesting. Well, yeah, but who is? I mean,
Yeah.
most people are like damaged inside their own head and never actually go to any trouble to try and fix themselves or to work through their stuff. They just project all their stuff outward at everybody else.
Yeah, and unfortunately, wherever you are, you're going to have to deal with that people and issue.
That's the way it is.
Yeah.
So, Titsmowitz says, "Hi, hello, always magical catching you live." Well, welcome. I don't think I've seen your name through my stream, so you've probably been hanging out in the background. Ophelia says, "Telepathy can definitely feel like you're losing your mind until you can get a good grasp on it." No kidding. Adam says, "Hi, Siofra. I was supposed to message you on Facebook before, but I now saw you came live. I think it will take me months to learn how to do creative visualization before I advance onto anything else."
It's well worth doing. Though.
It's definitely well worth doing, and it's not a bad thing that things take time. I've been at this consciously since I was about, 4 years old or so, and I'm learning new things all the time. There's always more to explore and to learn, and abilities to fine-tune and so forth. So it's a lifestyle. Taylor says, "Hello." Hi, Taylor. Adam says, "Because it won't be anytime soon, and I'm not even sure how good I will be at the end of the few months. What else do you want me to focus on along with the creative visualization guided meditation?" Well, we'll talk about that on Facebook. Tit says, "Not sure if I asked you this before, but what do you feel more relating, law of attraction or law of assumption?" Well, I've never heard of the law of assumption, so I don't know what you mean by that. If you mean law of assumption is like you assume that things are going to happen a certain way, and then they do, that would be like expectations being fulfilled, I would think. And that can be real or not real depending, because if your mind is set on seeing certain patterns and having certain things happen, then you're focused on those things, and other things might be going on all around and not noticing them at all because, too much focus in one direction means you miss things that might be coming from a different direction. Law of attraction would be one I'm more familiar with as far as, who you are and how you exist and so forth will attract certain elements to you, certain experiences and so forth to you, which is a pretty common way of looking at it. And in spellcasting or magic and stuff, the law of attraction is what we use when we try to create a spell that has similarities, something that we want to have happen in water. We use water type of elements and stuff in it and that kind of thing in order to set the stage and do it. I guess that's all I can think of at the moment. It's a huge subject, though. Yeah. Maya says, "My grandma passed a few years ago, just on the night of Halloween. I suppose to be sad, but this coincidence makes me laugh. She was really calm before her death, I'm assuming. Well, I'm glad it doesn't make you sad. She's probably not sad either." Jonathan says, "Dizzy, I've been too scared and intimidated to create an intelligence yet. My question is directly about the karma associated with them. I would need to understand before I can do it." It's always good to wait until you understand things better.
To me, it's like the karma of using a screwdriver to fix something or using a screwdriver to stab somebody. Either way, it's not the fault of the screwdriver. So the screwdriver doesn't have feelings about it in the normal sense, but if you consider God consciousness immanent, then that screwdriver has God consciousness within it, and it has spirits associated with it otherwise that are worthy of respect. So ideally, a person should treat every object with equal respect, which we don't. And elementaries, created or not, should be treated with that same kind of respect, but not any more respect than you would give a screwdriver. It's not going to do anything on its own. It's just going to sit there, unless you program in aspects. But again, that's a personal choice too. You know, if you're not comfortable with it on every level, then you definitely don't want to do it.
So the Misty System says, I'm glad to hear you're doing better, Ian. I'll be sending positive energy your way for the surgery. Thank you. I appreciate that. And yes, I figured you were talking about death. Lunar says, hello. Hi, Lunar. Nice to see you here. Writer says, very true. People want to change the world rather than change themselves. Been working hard on me and am now seeing the hard work paying off. Yes. Excellent. Ophelia says, yes, projection. It's astonishing how many people refuse to look at themselves. I can always tell when someone is triggered, why they are triggered, and that they definitely didn't do their shadow work. I know. That's the thing. It's like, it's so important, because without that, you're sort of like a leaf in the middle of a storm. You're just being blown around in any direction. And usually it's not a good place you end up landing. Dizzy says, I love the video about haunted objects. There are people who collect them. Some trap spirits in objects and sell them. Yes, we talked about that not being nice earlier, before you joined us. And it's not okay with me, for sure.
Yeah, as if from a magical point of view, as a magician, I would never want to do anything like that, because that also would give a person who sells it or whatever, the person who buys it would have a link to the seller that the seller might not like. Somebody could use that to come back on them, things like that. So for myself, I would never do something like that for many reasons. But
then there's the question of whether they actually know what they're doing and are actually doing what they think they're doing.
Well, yeah,
which is a whole different subject in and of itself.
Thing, yeah.
Delusions are
if they could
pretty common.
Successfully do it.
Right. But if they could successfully do it, I think it's a horrible thing to do. I would not do that. So Philippa says that, Jonathan, thank you. I will have a look. You are definitely right about Barden. Tits says, beautiful explanation. Thank you so much. You're welcome. Eva says, used to know someone who would buy objects like that. She wasn't a particularly nice person. Doesn't surprise me. Someone who thinks it's a good idea to, like, own something that's trapped inside of something else would, by my definition, not be someone I want to have anything to do with. That would be a big red flag for me. It's like, okay, don't. Jonathan says, whoops, come back here. I've seen only 2 answers so far, which moves faster across the sky, sun or moon. Community, which would you guess? Adam? Tasma says moon. Dizzy says servitors are created from our own energy. Not necessarily.
Don't have to be, yeah.
Yeah, you don't have to use your own energy for that. You can tap straight into the elemental forces directly. And if you don't use your own energy, you're probably going to be better off.
Yeah, if you use your own energy, then, well, anyway.
Whatever.
We don't need
People do it in different ways, and we don't use our own energy. Philippa says, I haven't shared this with you yet, as it is too weird, but during a face-to-face conversation with my son's landlord, I was suddenly able to see through his clothes, just his top. I didn't look down. Probably bright not to look down. Unusual. Jonathan says, lunar, which moves faster across the sky, sun or moon. Taylor says, just curious, why do you have 2 candles on that stand thing behind you?
Because we've taken the rest off of it to use for other things.
It holds 5. It just happens to be, that's the position it's in right now.
And that guy probably stole the other 3 for
You
various
probably
uses,
did.
Yeah.
But I bought that stand, that candle stand at like Ross's. I think it was the only one they ever had. I walked in one year and there it was, and I'm like, that's for me. And we used it for group rituals, going to other people's houses and stuff. Since it has 5 candles, we could have 1 for each of the elements, and then 1 for spirit, or the god and the goddess, or whatever we were working with. And have them lit when people called in the direction to sort of, because if you're in someone else's house, you're not going to be wandering around and putting candles everywhere. We had problems with that. We had one ritual where someone let their children through the ritual space and wasn't paying any attention to them, and they almost got themselves burned on, or knocked off candles and almost burnt the place down. I mean, you know, it was like not safe. So that is a safety mechanism that I came up with, because it's harder to knock over, and it's up front by the altars where people have to stay away from, and so forth. So, yeah. So there's no specific reason. No mysterious, magical reason, I should say. So Misty says, I'm interested in diving into shadow work, but don't quite know where to start. Do either of you have any suggestions? Look to the things that hurt you the most and the things that you're most afraid of. Write them down. And then look to the things about yourself that you think aren't good and write them down. And then look at them all again and figure out why. What are the core reasons why they're like that? So that you can begin to process and change the relationship. The idea of shadow work is to be able to face those fears and anxieties and insecurities within ourselves and turn them into strengths. Because if the unconscious is just able to do whatever it wants and doesn't have any conscious steering to go along with it, then you're going to be putting yourself in situations and places in order to satisfy those things that are in your unconscious. This is a way to get to know your own unconscious and subconscious self. And so then it becomes under your control rather than the other way around. It becomes like I guess more of a partner in it. And then it's a lot easier once you've identified those things and started to work with them to notice your own patterns of behavior. The times that you put yourself in a position where you're going to get hurt because you know the pattern, you've seen the pattern before, but you don't understand why you keep repeating the pattern. I have that one I found with my father. My father was a sadist and a alcoholic and a racist and a misogynist and about every negative thing you can imagine. And I, on part of my unconscious or subconscious, kept trying to prove to him that I was worthy of his love, that I was worth being loved. And so I unconsciously became attracted to men who weren't capable of love. And then I would try to convince them that I was worthy of their love. And since they weren't capable of love in the first place, it was a no-win scenario. So figuring that out about myself helped me break that pattern. And that's one of the reasons why Ian and I are together, because I did that work. That's just one example, but there's lots of things that are like that, and we all have different ones that are good to work on and to work with and so forth. So it's very worthwhile, and then you're much less likely to just sort of run into a burning building unless you happen to be a fireman and you've got the right equipment. So, you know, knowing what you're doing is important. Lunar says, to be honest, I don't know. Philippa says, I don't find him attractive and was very surprised at seeing this. My son thinks that his landlord is a flirt and that he probably projected this image onto me. Possible. That's a possibility. You might have been picking up on his subconscious thoughts that he was wishing he was naked. And, you know. Desidratum says, or Dizzy says, sorry, I missed the first 15 minutes. That's okay. We don't mind having the same questions. It's always good to get it out there.
I'm going to go take my lunch dose of Kraton that I forgot to take.
Okay, Ian's going to leave briefly. He's got to go take some meds. I'm really confused, Philippa says, and I really don't want to be seeing through people's clothing regularly, or ever again for that matter. Hopefully it's a one-shot deal. I can tell you something worse, seeing into their heart. So, yeah. Some people, that's a very frightening place to look at. I had that happen with a client of mine once where I was doing energy work on her, and I decided to take a deeper look into her heart center, and I've never seen anything so black in my life. It was truly frightening, and after that I couldn't work on her the same way. She picked up on it, and I ended up having to kick her to the curb and not work on her anymore. I just couldn't take it. And she noticed I wasn't doing as good of a job because of that, energetically speaking. So, Sav All says, I started by looking up the ecliptic plane to see how the Earth moves in relation to our moon. Now I think I'm going down a rabbit hole, and it's really too late at night to do for this. Well, considering the fact that the sun is stable and the moon moves around us, I would go with the moon myself. Lunar says, totally unrelated, but Siofra, what's your view on the LGBTQ plus community? I'm completely and totally supportive of them. Identity is a personal thing. And this is funny, okay? Because I'm vocally supportive of the community on Facebook, apparently Facebook decided that I must be a member of the community and has offered me a free app dating service so I can hook up. And I'm like, boy, Facebook, you sure don't get it when people aren't assholes. I mean, everybody is different, and I like differences in people. I think that the people who don't like others who are different is because they're insecure in their own skin, and anything that's different from them threatens their version of reality. That's kind of how I see it. And so people that are prejudiced against large groups of people or groups of different people or whatever, regardless of their supposed belief system, be they pagan or religious church people or anything, that's the core of that, is that for some reason there are people who believe that if someone is different from them, that is some kind of like a statement about them when it has nothing to do with them at all. So it's just silliness and annoying, and I hate it. I wish it wasn't there. And I'm very disappointed in all of the communities that are prejudiced against people who are different. It's none of my business. I judge people not by what they believe, but by how they act. And that goes with all of that. It's like how people act. If they're kind, generous, thoughtful individuals who are working on themselves, then they're good people in my book. And if they're not, then they're not. So, we're all allowed to have our own judgments and criticisms, and that's what I base my judgments on, is that as a criteria. Because everything else is just superficial when it comes down to it. Dizzy says, ooh, I would love to know other ways tulpas or servitors are created. Neat subject to talk about. Maybe so, but not today. It's too complicated. Jonathan says, I'm going to ruin my own game now. I only this week learned that the sun moves faster across the sky than the moon. My ignorance about something so fundamental to humanity startled me. I was amazed. Well, as far as our perception of it goes, I can see that. Kate says, I found when I visit my inner child who is using a dysfunctional reaction, if I say it doesn't work now and ask them if there's a better way for us, they always have a brilliant solution. Awesome. And that is definitely part of it, healing the different parts and aspects of ourselves. It's a good way of doing it. And that's part of that. We have assumptions that we've made about reality based on our experiences of it that started when we were very young. And the survival tactics that we generate are to keep ourselves going, and they work at the time that we generate them, because we're usually, if we have to generate them, we're in a situation with dysfunctional people. And almost always later on, those same patterns are also dysfunctional and they don't apply to the world at large. So being able to challenge those assumptions about how the world works is very important. And that would be definitely part of shadow work in itself, to challenge those ideas. So, Misty says, thank you so much for your insightful answer. You're welcome. Tits says, can deities or otherworldly beings actually help others on the physical level? My friend is obsessed with fans, and I don't know if it's my mind playing tricks, but his features were more beautiful. Okay, you'll have to tell me what kind of fans you're talking about, or if you meant something else and said the wrong word. Not drastic change, but altered. Well, certainly there are otherworldly beings that can help us on this level. There's a lot of different kinds of them that are out there. There's deities and spirits and nature spirits and, ancestor spirits and magical beings of other kinds and so forth. So I'm not sure exactly what you're asking.
It's not very easy for them to do anything physically.
Yeah, I've had a couple of things that have happened to me that were like unexplainable, and I can only put it down to some external force actually impacted the physical world and saved me. Um, I had this when I was living up in Saskatchewan, and I was riding the bus. It was wintertime, it was cold, and I was standing at the bus stop, and I suddenly remembered I'd forgotten my bus money, and I was mad, and I stormed across the street, which is something out of character. Usually I'm more cautious when I cross the street, and I just walked across the street, and I looked up to my right, and there was a car going about 30 miles an hour, probably less than 3 feet from me, and I stepped in front of him. And physics would say that that car would have to hit me, and I looked at the man's face the whole time I was walking in front of him, and he had a very strange expression. It was sort of frozen in fear and whatnot, and I was still too mad to even process what I was doing. And when I stepped in past him, when I passed the front of his vehicle, he was going by 30 miles an hour. It was like time shifted completely, and somehow I sped up, and I didn't do it myself as far as I know. I mean, this was something that I had no idea could even happen, and I didn't even realize that it happened until I got in the house and was mumbling about having to wait for the next bus. I'm going to be late for work. And then I went like, wait a minute, what was that? And then I had another incident that was similar, that happened in Maryland, and it was summer, or at least sunny out, as I was sitting on the back trunk of our car that was parked out in the street, and I was just sitting there, just hanging out, and this car started speeding at me, coming down the road, going like 60 miles an hour, and it was heading straight for where I was sitting, and someone else saw this happen. He was sitting up on the porch looking out, and he saw me sitting there, and he saw the car speeding at me, and there was like a road that was perpendicular. So like if this is the straight road that I'm on and the car's coming this way, there's another road that goes this way, and when it got to that other road, it was going this way, and then it was going that way just as fast, and no squealing of tires or anything, like someone just picked it up and just turned it. So I believe that those were instances of that kind of intervention. I think if I had, put myself at risk on purpose, that never could have happened. But, it's not like they're common. It was very, very strange. So, do you know how to cure myopia with magic? Any tips?
Been working on it, haven't made much progress.
Ian has been working on it, and nothing has worked so far. So I guess no. Tits says, why was her heart so black? Because she was an evil person. And the things that I heard that she did later confirmed that. She was just evil. It was, ugh. Daphne says, Siofra, I'm curious if you have any 12th house placements astrologically. I'd have to look it up. I don't know offhand. I know that the first time I had my chart done, it was a funnel chart. So I had, like, if the circle is like this, most of my planets were on this side, and only one planet was on that side. So everything funneled through Uranus, which was the planet that was over there, which makes sense because of my connection to the greater unconscious and healing and stuff. Lunar says, that answer made me cry. I'm not supported in my own home, and to know that many people online support it makes me happy. Good, I'm glad. Dancing Naked says, this may be out of left field. Safely communicating with our beloved dead, do you have any preference or safety tips? Be respectful. Don't let them in if they want to come into your body. I mean, have good boundaries. I don't know what to say with that. Phase, not fans. Okay. That's what I figured there was something wrong with that word, because I'm thinking, fans? I've never heard of beautiful fans. It's like, fans are nice. I like them. But yeah, Fae, I have a lot of relations with the Fae, and may be part Fae myself, potentially, depending on how we look at these things. So yeah, that's a possibility, I'm thinking. So Adam says, is it possible to bind the energy of an entity to a talisman alone and completely cut the link between the entity and the talisman, or is there a permanent link once the talisman is created? Let me think this through. If you bind the energy to a talisman alone, cut the link between the entity and the talisman. If you cut the link completely between the entity and the talisman, then the entity can't be in the talisman anymore. So I'm thinking the answer is no, or yes, depending on how you look at it.
I'm not capable of contributing.
Yeah, Ian is on the floor with a bit of a cramp there. Adam says, so there would be no external influence of the entity. In either scenario, can you explain what the process of how the link is severed, and if not, why is the link permanent and cannot be severed? I don't think I'm able to answer that question right now. So, Dancing Naked says, phase, totally. Glamour. Tit says, Dancing Naked, she was reading my question, and I was all, go on, Siofra, go on, goddess, and then she said fans, and I was like, say, Saval. According to the NSTA website, re the moon's inclined orbital plane, there are two types of shadows. The self-shadow, a darkened surface caused by the object itself blocking a source of light. Tit says that was pretty great from Dancing Naked. Prehistoric Matt says howdy. Hi, Prehistoric. Adam says, is it possible to locate a pet using remote viewing or astral traveling? If so, can you recall an instant where you have helped someone before where you did this? When you did this? I helped a person find their way home with a candle spell that I did on an emergency thing. A woman called me on the phone and asked me for help, and I got the girl's name, and when I lit the candle, she walked in the door. So that was kind of cool, but with pets, not so much. Saval says the cast shadow darkened volume extending into space that is caused by the object blocking the light source. Thought it was interesting. Yes, that would be what eclipses are, when the shadow is on the ground. Or in the moon's case, the eclipse would be when the Earth's shadow is going across the face of the moon, when it's on the full side. Philippa says, re the myopia. Barden mentions that the eye baths he recommends as part of initiation into Hermetics could possibly help poor eyesight.
Oh, that's true, he does.
Ian says, yes, he does recommend that.
He recommends doing it even with a drop of eye bright in the solution.
Using eye bright. You can always give it a try and see what happens. Eye bright, I think, is relatively safe unless you happen to be allergic to it. Jonathan says, Ian, I restarted with Barden this week based on last week's conversation. Decided to get going with moving my fingers with will instead of muscles. Any tips and tricks to share?
Not really. Everybody needs to keep in mind that doing the Barden stuff, it's all framed in such a manner that you're supposed to have all of the other abilities. So that one comes, I think, like around the 6th step or something like that. So to be able to do any of those things, Barden assumes that you have already managed to attain the other abilities in the previous chapters. So keep that in mind. If you're taking something out of context, he expects you to be able to do all that stuff.
Okay, so Concrete Angel says, hi, how is your day going? Pretty good. We just got back to calm and a little bit of sun. It's very variable here at the moment with these weather systems coming through rather quickly. Although the barometric pressure is extremely low. We're like on the bottom of the scale, which is very weird. So step 5, not versus. Yeah. Lily says, how can I tell if I'm connected to the Fae? It's a good question. I don't know. The Fae historically have a different kind of relationship with witches in general. We don't have the same relationship with the Fae that the average person has. So the people that are afraid of the Fae and all the stories that are about the Fae, those are stories to keep the average person, I guess, from encountering them and being safe and so forth. But the Fae have always noticed us. They notice magical people, people that are working with magical forces and that kind of thing. And so if you go out into the woods and you hear bells or you smell mint, for me, you hear little tinkling voices, you feel very connected to nature, you might be encountering the Fae and they're letting you know that they're there. A shift of light, suddenly the air is brighter, or you suddenly walk through a sudden unexpected fog. We've had magical mist a couple of times where all of a sudden this weird mist just pops up out of nowhere, just kind of like an indication that they're close and our worlds are kind of meeting one another type of thing. They don't work for us, and they will often work with us, but it's sort of like us deciding if we're going to be a medium and letting a spirit in or not. It's entirely up to them. It's not up to us. So they are like a different form of life energy, and they have their own thing that they are working with, and sometimes our paths will cross. Historically, there are some families in Ireland, in particular, that we know of that have, in the past, when the worlds were closer and physical reality and magical reality were not so separated like they are now, where there was some crossover between the Fae and humans. Whether this is historically true or not, it's always difficult to know, but that's what the stories say. And my family in Ireland lived at the base of one of the seven sacred hills of Ireland, and that's not a place an average person would live in Ireland. They usually stay away from those places, give them a wide berth because of the stories about them. So I guess that's about all I could say at this point. Sav Al says, how do you even calculate volume in a shadow? I'm going to ignore the science at the moment. Prehistoric Matt says, it's extremely stormy here today. It's great. The little creek behind my house has turned into a raging white water river, I guess. Yes. What fun. Philippa says, I may give the Eyebright a go at some point. After watching you on my phone, I won't be able to focus my eyes on anything else at all. I'm so sorry for you. Adam says, okay, what I meant is if the energy of an entity can be extracted without the entity being linked to a talisman, is there a permanent link that cannot be severed once the energy is binded? And I'm not answering that question here. Your questions indicate that you are missing a key component to magic, and that is the emotion and the feeling associated with it. Every question you have is intellectually oriented, so I'm assuming you're imbalanced in the air element, and so you need to work on your other elements and start to see about feeling the reality of things instead of trying to get, like, I don't know, an encyclopedic course, because that's not how it works.
Right. The emotional aspect needs to be absolutely the astral water for emotion.
Right. Lily says, I am 17% Irish and 15% Scottish, so maybe so. We'll see. Taylor says, do the Fae have their own problems to worry about themselves? I'm sure they do. They have their own thing, and I'm not privy to all of the things that they're working on. I think at this point we could close that window if you get too bright and warm.
Is it bothering you, dear?
Not too much yet because the sun just went away again, but it has that right angle, that one over there. If you feel up to getting up, don't do it until you're ready. Yeah. Philippa says, I would like to engage with Barden's teachings, but I'm stuck at the bristle body brush in preparation for pore breathing. And she means pour, not poor. It's like someone running their fingernails down a blackboard. Sets me on edge.
Well, a couple of things. One is that it's supposed to be a soft, natural bristle brush. For what that's worth, so make sure she doesn't have one it's not supposed to be a stiff brush.
It's not supposed to be a stiff brush. It's supposed to be a soft brush, something that you could go like that on your skin and not irritate it.
Natural bristle. The idea is just to slightly open up the pores and things.
Okay. It's just to slightly open up the pores. It's not supposed to be damaging to your skin.
And it's also probably not a necessity, though. It's a recommendation.
Ian says it may not be an absolute necessity, although it is a recommendation. So you might be able to find other ways to open up your pores. I know you have to be careful with that. I once used a loofah and it gave me a staph infection because, staph is something that's on everything. It's on our skin and stuff. And the loofah was hard enough that it made little scratches in my skin, and then those ended up being open to the staph, and it was not fun.
The thing about Barton's first thing is I never could get into his cold shower in the morning thing. So.
Yes, Ian says cold showers he does not very fond of. So Concrete Angel says, do you remember your earliest magical experience? They were happening on a regular basis when I was pretty young. Some of them I know about because my mother told me about them, so they're not my actual memories of them. So I'm trying to think about ones I can remember. Getting access to those memories has been difficult because of the trauma in my childhood. So I have flashes of a lot of that stuff. I spent a lot of time in the woods, climbing trees, interacting with my animals, my cat and my dog, and because the people I was with weren't smart enough to know what was going on, and it was clear to me that they didn't know how to act properly. So I was trying to find some form out there that, had better boundaries, apparently is what I was looking for. I remember seeing angels in the church. We were Methodist, and I always thought it was very strange that I would go into the church and I would see all these beautiful spirits, and the people seemed so sad, and I couldn't understand why they were so sad and miserable, because there were all these wonderful bright beings that were everywhere. I saw them outside too, not just in the church, but that was one I know I remember myself. I definitely ran into the Fae when I was pretty young. There were moments that became important, like unusual things that happened, like in the woods, that were magical to me. Like I found a patch of sand on a trail in the woods when I had been wandering around exploring and stuff, and it was the softest sand I'd ever experienced. Still is, actually. It was like talcum powder. It was amazing, and I wondered at how amazing it was that there was no sand anywhere else in the woods. This was the only place I ever saw sand, was this one little spot, and I wondered about it. And also Moida, the entity I ended up channeling for a while, I remember seeing her when I was young, and one night in particular where I opened my eyes and I saw this woman. I was on the top bunk of a bunk bed, and I saw a woman standing there looking at me, and I thought it was my mother at first, and I says, "It's okay, I'm okay, Mom." And then I woke up the rest of the way and she disappeared, and so she wasn't there. So I would consider that would be one of my earlier memories. I'm not sure how old I was at the time. So yeah, so those are what I can think of. Jonathan says, I wrote a message and it got lost because my power just went off. Because Africa, I have used Eyebright for my eyes with great success. Use it on the same day for sanitary reasons. It goes off. Good point. You want to make sure that things are clean when you're using them. Prehistoric Matt says, have you ever watched the Erwin Saunders series on YouTube? I don't know. Probably not then. Adam says, that's all CGI, LOL. Prehistoric Matt says, I know, but it's fun. Oh, I see. So the Erwin Saunders series on YouTube is CGI. Okay, gotcha. Prehistoric Matt says, I like the idea of a more real-world version of mythology creatures. Okay. So I haven't watched it. Sayal says, okay, so the sun is not stationary apparently. It does revolve around the Milky Way and takes approximately 230 million years to make one trip around it. The Misty System says, I wonder how the Fae feel about climate change. Do you think they could be pushed to the point of making themselves known by intervening with humanity's destructive habits? Probably not. But I'm sure that they're not happy. Adam says, have you ever seen a wyvern before? What do they look like, and what are the actual similarities between a wyvern and a dragon? Dancing Naked says, the Misty System, wouldn't that be something? Yes, it would be. But then that's the same problem as us waiting for the aliens to come and save our asses. What we really need to do is step up to the plate and do the right thing and save ourselves. Because if we don't, we're going to be in the same boat later. We're going to make exactly the same mistakes. We've not learned the lesson. So that's my opinion. Philippa says, I had a soft natural bristle brush. I brought it in prep for my wedding for vanity reasons. I threw it away. It was just awful. So don't use them. And then if they don't work for you, don't use them. Yep. You can maybe use a cloth and just sort of, rub your skin or something. I don't know. So Layla says, I love nature and have always had black cats just show up at my house. That's probably because they know you're safe. As we get closer to Halloween around here, no one is allowed to actually adopt a black cat this time of year because people are so incredibly stupid and moronic that apparently they like to take them and then do horrible things to them. Like, who can get off on that? I don't know. I don't want to know. Jonathan says at Sav Alley, my brain's not working, the Earth spinning while it moves around the sun, while the moon circles the Earth, while the moon circles the sun, melted my brain. It's true. We are not solid rock. We are not sitting on anything still. We just have the appearance of stillness. We are hurtling through space at a high rate of speed and spinning around on our axis, as well as trying to fly around the sun and leave the solar system as the sun tries to suck us back into the sun. And without that balance, we'd all be dead. Yeah. So Layla says, most of my cats have always been black and not like normal cats. I like black cats too. I've had a lot of them because I know I'm safe for them and they're not going to get hurt if they're with me. Philippa says, I am into a good cold shower though, as I'm a proponent of the Wim Hof method. I have chronic illness and I'm so much better. Good. Finding things that work. Philippa says, Erwin Saunders, the fairy guy who is a CGI buff, very well put together and worth a watch. So we have recommendations for something. Prehistoric Matt, the difference in a wyvern and a dragon is a wyvern has 4 limbs and a dragon has 6. Well, actually, some dragons only have 2. And some have 4. So I don't know that that's actually true, because I've met dragons with none as well. So, yeah, anyway. I think they're a mythological creature, and they can vary quite a bit when you actually see one in the spirit world. Concrete Angel says, so sad about black cats. Yes, it's incomprehensible to me. People don't make sense to me a lot. But, that's why I'm me, I guess. Concrete Angel, oh yeah. Philippa says, I use a loofah every day. I'll have to watch. I don't overdo it. Yeah, I don't use them anymore because of that, because apparently my skin is extremely sensitive to scratching too much. Prehistoric Matt says wyverns are cooler, though. Adam says, Matt, have you seen a wyvern in the astral before? Prehistoric Matt says, no, I just study monsters. I know as much about dragons as much as I know Godzilla. D&D player? A lot of the D&D manuals actually have a lot more accurate information about prehistoric mythical creatures than most books that I've found. It's kind of, sometimes it's the only place I've been able to actually find a piece of information about it, which is interesting. But hey. So, now what? You kept me going there for a while. Time to make me chatterbox again. There's 32 people now.
Sorry, I'm going to be gone.
That's okay. You can just lay there and relax. If you really get engaged, you'll jump up and say something.
If I can.
Jonathan says, Philippa, it's maybe because I'm just a bad student, but I take a grain of salt together with all magical advice I encounter.
It's always a good idea myself.
It's actually not a bad idea at all. Because, everyone is different. It's kind of like when you meet someone and they say something like, you can't be allergic to that because it's good for you. You go like, excuse me? If I eat that, it will kill me. We're all different, and it's okay. Save Al says, oh my God, too much movement, too much. If I were in space, which technically I am, I would probably dive into a black hole to try and find some stillness. Ha ha! The illusion of stillness as time stretches and you're slowly pulled apart, where your head is closer to the event horizon than your feet, and you stretch out in eternity. Yeah, I don't know. That doesn't sound like a much better option to me. Jonathan says, Mia, I'm about to condescend to you. Prepare yourself. Whoops, come back here, as it went and moved on me while I was trying to read it. You know that Loki isn't Tom Hiddleston, right?
I don't know.
Misty says, what do you personally believe happens after death? Me, whatever it is that you expect is what I personally believe happens after death. So being aware of your own belief systems is going to make a huge difference to you when you're gone. If Starhawk said it's not enough to reject a belief system, you have to replace it. And I agree, because if you don't replace it, then you're going to be stuck with whatever belief system was put in your head when you were little. So you decide for yourself what you think is going to happen, and work on it from that level. That's what I would do. Prehistoric Matt says, no, I just collect animal and monster information. I draw a monster every week, and I'm at about the 280th congruent weekly monster. This week is the Fiskerton Phantom. 380th, actually. Cool. Must be a good artist. Dancing Naked says, here's a question. Which deities should one work with in order to influence the CEOs in favor of our Earth? Ha! Did that make sense? Yeah, because I don't think that will work that way. The problem is greed and power, and we need to change the entire paradigm that we're working with, which is going to take a long time. So the only thing that's going to work is us deciding that we're going to make them do it, whether they want to or not. I don't know. So, Sav Al says, I'm also trying some cold therapy. It definitely wakes me up in the morning. Nancy Naked says, your after death idea is very Pratchett. Wonderful. Actually, it'd be more like the book and the movie, What Dreams May Come. But yeah. I mean, I've crossed enough spirits over at this point, and I've seen all kinds of different places that they're going to, and every one has been different. No two have been alike. So that's why I believe that, from practical experience, from seeing where they're heading. And so, not just an idea. So Concrete Angel says, wow, I never thought about that. Prehistoric Matt said, CEOs. Adam says, is it true that our astral body cannot be destroyed? No, it is not true that our astral body cannot be destroyed. It can be destroyed. Apparently, we're not answering the rest of that question because we only have 2 minutes left. We'll have to make that another topic. Jonathan, Philippa says that Jonathan, I could always use a salt scrub to prep my skin, and yep, I'm totally into questioning the author's bias. Well, yeah, because everybody is going to have the climate in which that they are, whatever things around it. Sort of like some of the herbal books that I recommend, like Back to Eden by Jethro Kloss. His biases are like insanely stupid in a lot of ways, but his knowledge about herbs and what they do and how to use them is, phenomenal and accurate. So, Misty's system says, that's really interesting answer, thank you. Jonathan says, the god is Mars, Aries, the god of war, but do we have the know we need to do to combat climate change? I'm not sure how to answer that, or if that's even a question. Do you know the image of Stravolus? Ringing any bells for you? Not for me either. The Mage, sorry, not the image. The Mage of Stravolis, still not ringing any bells. Prehistoric Matt says, you influence the CEOs of the giant snake, obviously a hungry snake. Yes, the worm Ouroboros consuming itself until there's nothing left. Nancy Nagin says, thank you for answering our questions. You're welcome. Violet says, I appreciate you both. I listened the whole time. Thank you. You're welcome. I'm glad to have you here. Daphne says, thanks. Thank you, Siofra. Glad I could pop in for the first time. A very nice rest of your day to you. Thank you very much. Good play on words. Philippa says, what dreams may come? I may have to watch it again. Love that movie. Yeah, and it was based on a book that was written in like 1950. Mia says, do you have any special prepares for Halloween? Not this year. Just sort of going along and just being in the moment and where we are. Jonathan says, good night, everyone. You guys are awesome. You've noticed that it's been an hour and a half and you are saying your goodbyes before it's too late. Love you all. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, send me an email at schieffersmagicalcove@gmail.com.
Goodbye,
And
everyone.
we'll talk to you guys next week and see you in the ether, perhaps. Katie says, thanks for your wisdom and generosity. Save Alice says, be well, take care of yourselves. All right, will. Thank you very much.